Welcome to Progressive Retail. I'm your host, Cory Mosley. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, we've got another great show planned for you today. DealerSocket recently held its annual User Summit. It was one of the biggest ever and included the launch of their new system, Blackbird. In addition to being one of the featured speakers at the event, I also attended a media breakfast where they first revealed their Dealer Action Report. This report is the culmination of data collected from more than 10,000 dealerships, also done in conjunction with Google. The purpose of the report was to aid dealers in identifying and prioritizing processes and technologies that will be most impactful to their consumer and their businesses. I have read the 32-page report, and I want to share some of the highlights with you today and offer some suggestions for addressing some key consumer concerns. Now, I basically want to go through this with you almost in real time. I've got the report here. It's going to be available online. I'm sure you can get it. But I wanted to just pull through some highlights. So I literally had it printed out for you to go through some of the highlights that I thought were pretty interesting and important. And in these surveys, there were a couple key things that I thought were very interesting. You know, they asked the age-old question, do you enjoy the car buying process? So 81% of the people said no. I don't think that's really a surprise when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. I'm pretty sure 81% of people don't like going to the dentist either. Now, I've got a great dentist. He's a nice guy. He's got TVs and warm blankets and soothing music, but I still have no desire to go to the dentist. So I get it. I understand it. What was interesting here is when we looked at the leading no consumer responses, 85% by age fell into a 45 to 54-year-old demographic, and 85% were female. What I find interesting there is for 20 years or more, we've been talking about the idea of how to better sell to female customers or millennial customers or these segments. This doesn't seem like we're making gains in that area, and I definitely think it's something worth paying attention to. Also, when we talk about enjoying the car buying process, 29% of those who responded in the survey mentioned that they don't trust salespeople. And that's the #1 reason that they cite for not liking the car buying process. I think that's interesting because what we're also looking for is ways to build trust. Now, a lot of people are using the buzzword transparency, and transparency is important. And when they looked at the connection between increasing consumer trust, they found one of the most transparent ways to do it, and one of the biggest gains that they found, and this is according to J.D. Power, that the #1 contributor was the use of a tablet device. And I think that's very interesting. On previous shows, we've talked about the idea of the Apple experience inside of dealerships. So my question is, what are you doing about that right now? What are you thinking about when it comes to the idea of having a Surface or an iPad in the store and then executing? Now, I caution you on this idea that it's simply going to be a point-and-click situation. You're going to log on to Apple. Great, Cory, let's get some iPads. 12 show up, 15 show up, 20 show up at the dealership, and now all your problems are solved. Of course, it's going to be how you set up and execute the consumer experience, but that was an interesting thing that's a #1 contributor. So if you're looking for ways to increase confidence and transparency and reduce the #1 reason for this study that people don't like the car buying process, which is lack of trust, then this is certainly a way to start on the pathway to doing it. But because people like the familiarity of that connection. A few years ago, I was part of a rollout of a company called iTap Menu that was one of the early pioneers, I think at least, in iPad in the F&I office. So they're finding that PVRs and so many different things are happening when you can put that device and create that kind of easy touch, easy flow experience with the customer. So again, it's an ongoing challenge. I figure out, and I want you to figure out a way to implement that in the store effectively. What else do we have? It's 32 pages long. I'm not covering it all today, but I wanted to cover some of the highlights and some of the finer points. Websites, dealership websites. See, a lot of times we are in this battle of what's important and what's not important. According to this report, 52% of the respondents cited that using a website for resources and information as well as a place to shop was equally important. So 52% cited that both of those things are important. Why does this matter? This matters because we're going through this whole evolution when it comes to websites. If you think about your website 5 years ago, I hope it's changed, but if you think of your website 3 years ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, think about the evolution. How does it look? How does it function? How does it work? And who are the people telling us how all of these things should happen? What should the consumer behavior be? What are people observing? Is a green button better than a red button? So my question is, this is a great opportunity when you think about what consumers are responding to. The question I throw back to you is, what opportunities are you trying to accomplish and leverage on the website? So as you work with your vendors to craft these sites and not just go with the turnkey ones that everybody has, what are you delivering as an experience to the customer? And what is it actually accomplishing for you? Are you hitting equally on both of these? This is almost like achieving 50-50 weight distribution in a vehicle. The next thing, this was interesting. How do you feel about knowing whether or not you're in an equity position? So, of course, equity is not a new topic. It's just a super hot topic nowadays. There are individual companies built solely on the premise of mining the database and creating equity scenarios. So it's interesting. They gave a 3-point scale. Number 1 was not important. Number 2 was moderately important. And number 3 was very important. Consumers cited highly important or very important on this report. And I think that's worth looking at. So, begs the question, how aggressive is the equity mining strategy in your store today? Do you have one? How aggressive is it? And what type of resources have you put behind it? All too often I find in stores, we treat some of these items like a checkbox item. It's like, hey, do you have a website? Check. Hey, do you have a BDC? Check. Not how efficient, effective are these things. It's just a matter of having them or not having them. When's the last time you've evaluated your equity mining or equity marketing strategy? I think this is key because it's becoming more and more important for customers to have that information. Now, negotiating. This is very controversial. We talk about one price. I've had people on that have built one price stores and been very successful with them. The question, do you like to negotiate or be given the best price up front? 57% said they wanted the best price up front. 43% said they prefer to negotiate. Now, you might be saying, Cory, there it is. People want one price. The follow-up question was, when you were given the best price up front, do you trust it? 88% of the respondents said no. So this creates a situation. Furthermore, very eye-opening here, 60% of men aged 18 to 24 prefer to negotiate. And we found that millennials also have a high interest in this idea of negotiating as well. And I think that's very important to look at because that 18 to 24 is dead smack in that millennial territory. So that may change your thoughts in terms of what people want or how they want it. And it may be something to consider as you map out what your pricing strategy will be in your store. Digitally, on the digital retail side, this other thing that's bubbling up and we're seeing challenges and a lot of data is coming back on. When buying a car, would you like to be able to complete the entire process online? I'm sure you're hearing about this, products, services. There's manufacturers running several pilots. We're involved in some of those. The answer was 33% said yes. So when you think of that right now, a lot of people might think that might be a higher number because we're looking at the wave of customers and saying, hey, this is how people want to buy. But it's very interesting. It looks like, according to this, we're not quite there yet. Now, when you break that down, here's what was interesting. 37% of the total respondents who answered that question, of them, 37% were men who said yes. 29% were women. 50% were people earning $100,000 to $149,000. So this idea of delivering this experience could be trending towards the higher end, higher income earning buyer who prefer quick, easy, and convenient and are very digital to begin with. So again, it's just another thing to consider overall. On the service side, I want to close with the service piece. Top 5 reasons customers don't take their car to the dealership for service. And this is interesting because we know that service departments are under attack. Labor rates, the Pep Boys of the world, the Meineke's, the Quick Lubes that are out there really aggressively trying to take that business. So here's interesting. This might be eye-opening for some, maybe. Number 1 was price. And I think a lot of times it's perception. Many of you have the boards that compare pricing in the area. I think that dealer education piece on the front end is very important to following through the process to get people want to engage in the service department with you. Number 1 was price, number 2 was convenience, and number 3, less time consuming. Number 4, higher level of customer service, and number 5, higher transparency with the services. There's that transparency word that keeps creeping up in the minds of the consumers. Folks, it's 32 pages long. We'll get a link up on the screen so you can download it. But it's very interesting. You know, the key to data is that data is everywhere. So this is simply going to be the way I see it. Finally today, there is no shortage of access to data. This report highlights clearly some issues you might be aware of and some maybe you didn't know about. But it also shows the difference in perception between dealers and their customers. As the saying goes, sometimes you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. As we head towards the closing months of 2016, we're being told to prepare for a potential down year in 2017. My question is, what does the word prepared mean to you? Does it mean personnel changes, expense cutting, or investing in things that will strengthen the organization and make it bulletproof? In Mark Wahlberg's latest movie, Deepwater Horizon, which was a dramatization of the April 2010 disaster when the offshore drilling rig Deepwater Horizon exploded and unfortunately created the worst oil spill in U.S. history, his character is quoted as saying, "Hope is not a tactic." So I challenge you to make a bold new decision at your dealership today, not tomorrow, so we can continue to control our destiny and our history. And that simply is the way I see it. That's our show for today. I want to thank you for watching, and I ask that you share this show with any colleague that could benefit from this information. Please visit us online at mosleyautomotive.com to learn more about how we are helping dealers become more progressive and profitable. I'm Cory Mosley, and this has been another episode of Progressive Retail, exclusively on the CBT Automotive Network. I'll see you next week.